Hello and welcome to day 10 of Lifestyle Prescriptions Bootcamp. Yesterday I talked about the autonomic nervous system and the two phases and the symptoms that you can experience in those two phases. So today, taking it one step further, I'd like to discuss some examples of organ symptoms that may be experienced in both of those phases, because each organ will go through the sympathetic and then the parasympathetic nervous system active phases, and after the parasympathetic phase you get into normal health again, unless it becomes chronic and it just starts going round in a loop. Now the first phase is, as I just said, the sympathetic nervous system, and that is also called the stress phase. You noticed yesterday those symptoms were all the stress ones, the monkey mind and that kind of thing, not sleeping. And then the second phase is the parasympathetic nervous system, and that is the regeneration phase, as the body is starting to repair and heal and get back to normal health, really. So I've got 6 examples tonight just to let you know some of the different symptoms that you get in each phase. Now, let's look at breast glands first. In the sympathetic state, we will find lumps in the breast glands. You won't notice anything else except the lump. But when you get to the parasympathetic state, active, with breast lumps in the breast gland, that's when you would feel inflammation. Maybe there's painful scarring, calcification, and a degradation of the lump. So it just depends on how long it's been there as to what stage it's at. The second one is the eyelid, and when this is under stress, one of the tissues is under stress, you actually don't notice it. But when you get to the parasympathetic nervous system active, which is the regeneration phase, that's when you would get a sty. There's inflammation and pain, and boy, we know all about that. So the third one is the larynx mucosa. So that is in our throat. Our larynx is down here, and the mucosa is the lining on the inside of the throat. In the sympathetic phase, which is the stress phase, you might, probably not, but there is a numbness there. That is usually unnoticeable, but you may find a speech dysfunction. It may just feel a little different. And then when you go into the regeneration phase with the larynx mucosa, which is the parasympathetic phase, that's when there's swelling, a sore throat, maybe even laryngitis. And then the fourth one, large intestine, that's the colon. In the sympathetic phase, which is the stress phase, that's when constipation might be noticeable. And then in the regeneration phase, which is the parasympathetic phase, that is when the symptoms of IBS, ulcerative colitis, and perhaps diarrhea as well, which are probably with both of IBS and ulcerative colitis. The fifth example I'd like to just mention is the duodenum. As the inner mucosa we're looking at here. Now the duodenum comes just after the stomach, and it's right at the top of the small intestine. And the inner mucosa is the inner lining of cells. So in the stress or sympathetic phase active in the duodenum inner mucosa, you would feel a painful ulceration. And when you go into the regeneration, which is the parasympathetic active phase, there would be bleeding, and you would know the bleeding was from there because your stool would be black. That means that the blood has come from very high up in the intestines. If the blood is bright red, it's from much lower down in the intestines. So the last one I'd like to mention is joint or bone pain. Now in the stress phase, this is not actually noticeable. But if it's a chronic, long, ongoing issue, which could be years and years, then you would only know about this by testing, and that would show up as something like osteoporosis. When you go into the regeneration or parasympathetic phase with joints or bones, that's when you feel pain, rheumatism, and arthritis. Okay, so from those 6, you can see that they're quite different from one phase to the next. And in fact, it's a bit of a surprise really to find that we're calling often painful things the regeneration or healing phase. So that's just something to think about, isn't it? Now, an exercise I'd like to suggest that you do is that you write down 1 to 3 symptoms that you experience. And it can be severe, chronic, ongoing symptoms, or an acute symptom that you've had. It may be severe or not so bad either, just to get the idea of where you are with it. And then during the day and the night, notice any changes in the symptoms. Do they get worse? Do they get less? Do they disappear and then come back again later? Or do they change completely? And this will be when you go from the sympathetic stress phase to the parasympathetic regeneration phase, and you're on your way towards healing. So have a note down. It's good to actually write it down, because you forget what actually has happened, and write the time down, a time of day as well, and you can start seeing a pattern. Maybe it's worse in the mornings, maybe it's a little worse in the evenings. Maybe it's quite bad for 3 or 4 days, and then it changes, it's gone. So what happened before that? Was that the regeneration phase, and then before that was the stress phase? You can figure these things out if you start taking note and focusing on them. So have fun with that, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye then.